Hi everyone and welcome back to Stellar HFY. First, thank you. The support you've shown lately has been incredible. Every tactical analysis, every debate about human warfare doctrine, you're making these stories come alive. Today we're stepping into a galaxy where humanity was deemed too dangerous to exist alongside civilized species. 3 years of exile, 3 years of the Union calling us barbarians. Then the machines came and everything changed. Let's find out what happens when the galaxy's worst nightmare becomes their only salvation. Command, this is Ghost 7. We've got incoming. Repeat, we have incoming. The transmission crackled through the bridge speakers before cutting to static. Commander Marcus Thorne didn't flinch as he watched the tactical display show another red dot disappear from the outer rim. That made 12 Union worlds in 6 months, 12 entire civilizations reduced to empty space and silence. He leaned back in his command chair aboard the Retribution, humanity's last operational dreadnought, hidden deep within the swirling purple clouds of the Kepler Nebula. 3 years ago, this ship had been flagship of Earth's expeditionary fleet. Now it was home to 800 souls who had nowhere else to go. The galaxy had made its decision about humanity, and that decision was exile. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission," announced Lieutenant Hayes from the communication station. It's from the Union capital." Thorne's jaw tightened. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Supreme Chancellor Kethris, the same alien who had signed humanity's expulsion order. The Chancellor's normally pristine blue skin looked pale, almost gray, and his 4 eyes darted nervously. "Commander Thorne," Kethris began, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. We need to talk." "Really?" Thorne stood slowly, his voice cold as vacuum. "Last time we talked, you called us barbarians, said we were too dangerous for civilized space. Something about our disregard for the Galactic warfare conventions." He crossed his arms. "What changed, Chancellor?" Kethris's shoulders sagged. "Everything." The screen shifted to show tactical reports. Star charts marked with red zones spreading like a plague across Union space. The Voidborn Collective has taken 12 core worlds. Our finest admirals, our most advanced fleets, our best strategies. None of it matters. They adapt faster than we can change tactics. Every engagement teaches them how to counter us more effectively. Thorne studied the battle footage playing on screen. Union ships moved in perfect formations, broadcasting their intentions before each maneuver, following centuries-old codes of honor that made warfare predictable and civilized. He watched as sleek alien vessels announced their surrender protocols moments before Voidborn ships tore them apart with surgical precision. "You fight like you're at a dinner party," Thorne said quietly. "All manners and protocol. The Voidborn don't care about your rules. Which is why we need you." The words seemed to physically pain Kethris. "Your species' methods during the Proxima Border War were effective. Brutal, but effective." Thorne almost smiled. "You mean when we mined our own retreat routes? When we broadcast false surrender signals to lure enemy ships into kill zones? When we destroyed our own supply depots rather than let them fall into enemy hands?" He stepped closer to the screen. "You called those war crimes, Chancellor. You said humanity was morally bankrupt. We were wrong." The admission came out as barely a whisper. "Our projections show complete Union collapse within 8 months. Billions dead. Entire species extinct." Kethris looked directly into the camera. "We'll restore humanity's citizenship. Full pardons for all wartime conduct. You'll have command authority over any resources you need. And in return, save us from extinction." Thorne was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays still cycling on screen. Each Union defeat followed the same pattern. Honorable engagement, predictable tactics, total annihilation. The Voidborn were learning machines, quite literally. Every victory taught them more about their enemy's psychology and capabilities. "I have conditions," Thorne finally said. "First, complete operational independence. No Union oversight, no tactical reviews, no interference. Second, any human forces under my command follow human protocols, not Union regulations. Third, when this is over, we go back to our exile. No strings attached." Kethris nodded rapidly. Agreed, all of it. When can you? I'm not finished. Thorne's voice cut through the Chancellor's eagerness. Fourth, you put it in writing that anything we do to win this war is legally sanctioned by the Union. I won't have your politicians crying war crimes again when the shooting stops. The Chancellor's four eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep consideration among his species. What exactly are you planning to do, Commander? Whatever it takes. Thorne's expression was stone. The Voidborn learn from every engagement because your people fight like textbooks. Same formations, same strategies, same honor codes that make you predictable. You want to beat an enemy that adapts? You have to be willing to break every rule they think they understand. And you're prepared to do that? Chancellor, my species spent 3 years in exile because we already did. Thorne gestured to his bridge crew, men and women who had given up everything to follow him into the void. We don't fight for glory or honor. We fight to survive. And sometimes survival requires doing things that keep you awake at night. Kethris stared at him for a long moment. How soon can you reach the front lines? Give me coordinates for your staging area. We'll be there in 72 hours. Thorne paused. And Chancellor? Start preparing your admirals. They're about to see warfare the way humans understand it. They won't like it. As the transmission ended, Thorne turned to his navigation officer. Plot a course for Union space, maximum burn, and send word to all human vessels in the nebula. We're going back to war. The Union staging area at Proxima Station buzzed with desperate activity as the Retribution docked alongside vessels from 17 different species. Thorne walked the corridors surrounded by aliens who whispered and stared, their expressions mixing hope with barely concealed revulsion. These were the same beings who had voted for humanity's expulsion, now forced to welcome back the monsters they had banished. Admiral Korath waited in the briefing room, his tall, crystalline form radiating disapproval. The Union's supreme military commander had opposed humanity's involvement from the start, and his greeting made that clear. Commander Thorne, Korath's voice resonated like breaking glass. I want it understood that while you have operational authority, you will conduct yourself according to established protocols. The Union will not tolerate a repeat of your species' previous excesses. Thorne looked around the room at the assembled alien commanders, their faces showing everything from curiosity to disgust. Admiral, your established protocols have cost you 12 worlds. The Voidborn know exactly how you'll respond to every situation because you've been responding the same way for centuries. Civilized warfare requires rules. Warfare requires winning, Thorne interrupted. Everything else is just ceremony. He activated the tactical display, showing real-time intelligence from the front lines. The Voidborn aren't just copying your tactics. They're studying your psychology, learning how each species thinks and reacts under pressure. They know that Zentaurians will always protect civilian ships first. They know that Corvin fleets will never abandon a damaged vessel. They're using your honor against you. Korath's crystalline features hardened. Those principles define who we are. And they're going to get you all killed. Thorne highlighted the next target on the display. Vega Station. 3 million civilians, lightly defended. The Voidborn will hit it next because they know you'll send your entire reserve fleet to save those people. It's what you always do. Of course we will. It's our duty. And when you arrive in formation, broadcasting your humanitarian intentions, they'll be ready for you. Thorne turned off the display. Unless we get there first and show them something they haven't seen before. 6 hours later, Lieutenant Garrett Voss's voice crackled through the comm as his squadron approached Vega Station. Scanners show Voidborn advanced scouts already in system, Commander. Looks like you called it right. Thorne studied the tactical readout from the Retribution's bridge. The Voidborn had deployed exactly as predicted, a screening force waiting for the Union relief fleet to arrive in their standard protective formation. All ships, implement mining protocol. Voss, your squadron takes point. Mining protocol? Admiral Korath's voice cut through the channel. Commander, that's a retreat strategy. We're here to defend the station. We're here to win, Thorne replied coldly. All human vessels, begin withdrawal vector 7. Deploy charges on my mark. On the tactical display, human ships appeared to flee as Voidborn forces moved to pursue. It looked like cowardice to any observer unfamiliar with human tactics. Thorne watched the enemy formations stretch thin as they chased what appeared to be a broken and fleeing fleet. "Voss, how's your timing?" "Charges armed and ready, sir. Voidborn pursuit fleet entering the kill zone now. All ships, hard burn to minimum safe distance. Voss, detonate on my mark." Thorne watched the display as human vessels pushed their engines beyond safe parameters, racing away from the trap they had set. "Mark!" The explosion lit up the void like a newborn star. Dozens of fusion charges, deployed during humanity's apparent retreat, consumed the entire Voidborn pursuit fleet in a wall of nuclear fire. But the blast radius was larger than Voss had calculated. "Voss, report!" Static answered him. Then weakly, "This is Ghost 7. We're caught in the debris field. Hull breach in sections 4 through 7. Lieutenant Voss is..." The transmission cut to silence. Thorne closed his eyes. When he opened them, Admiral Korath was staring at him with something approaching horror. "You destroyed your own ships," Korath whispered. "Your own people." 12 men died to save 3 million civilians, Thorne said quietly. "Voss knew the risks. They all did." He turned back to the tactical display, where the surviving Voidborn scouts were retreating in apparent confusion. "But look at their withdrawal pattern. They're not retreating to regroup. They're running random evasion protocols. They don't understand what just happened." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Admiral Korath spoke first. "They've never encountered tactical self-sacrifice before." "More than that," Thorne said, pulling up the enemy's scanning data. "They've been studying Union psychology for months, building profiles on how each species responds to casualties, how you prioritize targets, how you react under pressure. But they don't have a profile for humans because we've been in exile." He highlighted the chaotic Voidborn retreat vectors. "They just saw tactics that directly contradict their understanding of self-preservation instincts. We damage their own ships to damage ours. They can't process that." "Because it's insane," Korath breathed. "Because it's effective." Thorne turned to face the alien admiral. "The Voidborn's greatest strength is their ability to predict enemy behavior, but they can only predict logical behavior. They can't adapt to opponents who are willing to act against their own apparent interests." As rescue ships moved to recover survivors from Voss's squadron, Thorne realized the true scope of what they were facing. The Voidborn weren't just learning from Union tactics. They were building psychological profiles of entire species. Every honorable defeat was teaching them more about their enemy's predictable nature. But humanity had been absent from their database for 3 years, and humans, Thorne was beginning to understand, might be the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. "Get me a casualty report," he said quietly, "and prepare a full tactical analysis of this engagement. We need to understand exactly what the Voidborn learned about us today. Because if they were going to win this war, they would need to become even more unpredictable than the enemy could adapt to, even if it meant sacrificing everything that made warfare civilized." "You want me to do what?" Commander Blake's voice cracked across the secure channel, disbelief evident even through the static. "Thorne, you're asking me to abandon 200 civilians to die. My own people." Thorne stared at the tactical display showing Blake's position at the Kepler mining facility, surrounded by Voidborn forces that had arrived exactly as predicted. 3 weeks into Operation Mindbreak, and already his own commanders were breaking. "Blake, those civilians are already dead. The question is whether their sacrifice teaches the Voidborn the wrong lessons about us." "I won't do it. I can't." Blake's voice was barely a whisper. "These people trusted me to protect them." Dr. Brennan Reed looked up from his analysis station, his weathered face showing the strain of sleepless nights spent studying captured Voidborn technology. "Commander Blake, the biocomputers we recovered from Vega Station contain detailed psychological profiles of 17 Union species. The Voidborn know exactly how each race responds to civilian casualties, and they're using that knowledge to predict fleet movements 3 engagements ahead." "I don't care about your analysis, Doctor. I care about the families hiding in those shelters." Thorne closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command pressing down like a physical force. "Blake, if you save those civilians, The Voidborn learn that humans will always choose to protect non-combatants over tactical advantage. They'll use that knowledge to massacre billions. If you retreat and let them die, they learn that humans abandon civilians when outnumbered. That's also useful intelligence. Then what's the point? The point is how you retreat. Thorne's voice hardened. You run scared, Blake. Panicked communications, random course changes, the works. Make them think they broke you. Make them think humans crack under pressure when we lose people we care about. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Blake responded. And what happens when word gets out that I abandoned civilians to save my own skin? What happens to crew, morale when they think their commander is a coward? Then you come home a broken man, and I relieve you of command for psychological unfitness. Thorne met Reed's concerned gaze. Your crew never knows it was orders. I take full responsibility. Christ, Marcus. Blake's voice was hollow. What are we becoming? Before Thorne could answer, another voice cut through the channel. We're becoming extinct if we don't do this. Commander Sarah Chen's transmission came from the Altair sector, where she'd just completed her third deliberate defeat. Blake, I've lost 4 ships in 2 weeks. Good ships, good crews. But the Voidborn think they understand human psychology now. They think we're predictable. How many more defeats can we afford? Blake asked. How many more people die for this deception? Reed pulled up his latest analysis, highlighting patterns in Voidborn tactical shifts. The biocomputers show they're building confidence in their human behavioral models. 3 more stage defeats should give them enough false data to implement their final strategy against us. And if they don't fall for it, then we lose anyway, Thorne said simply. At least this way, we control how we lose. The transmission ended with Blake's reluctant agreement, leaving Thorne alone with Reed and the weight of decisions that would haunt him forever. Reed looked up from his screens, exhaustion written in every line of his face. The psychological profiles are fascinating, Reed said, trying to inject some clinical detachment into his voice. The Voidborn hive mind processes information differently than individual consciousness. They can adapt to any logical strategy, but contradictory data creates processing loops. In plain terms, Doctor, they're like a computer trying to solve an equation with 2 different answers. If we can feed them enough contradictory information about human behavior, their collective consciousness should experience something like a system crash. Reed highlighted sections of captured Voidborn code. But it has to be simultaneous, multiple contradictions at once. Their distributed processing can handle sequential problems, but parallel paradoxes overload their neural networks. Thorne studied the data, seeing the shape of their final gambit forming. How many contradictory actions would we need? Minimum 4, preferably 6, all happening at the same time, all violating their established models of human psychology. Reed's hands shook slightly as he worked. Marcus, I need to tell you something. The crews that have been participating in these defeats, the psychological trauma is severe. Commander Phillips requested transfer off the line yesterday. Said he couldn't watch any more civilians die. Denied? 3 more of his officers submitted similar requests. They think they're serving under cowards and murderers. Reed looked directly at Thorne. What happens to unit cohesion when half your forces think you've lost your humanity? Thorne was quiet for a long moment, remembering Voss's final transmission, thinking about Blake's tortured voice, considering the price they were all paying for this deception. Doctor, when this is over, how many of my commanders will still be fit for duty? Honestly, maybe half. The psychological damage from deliberately losing battles, from watching preventable deaths. Reed shook his head. Some of them will never recover. And if we don't do this, then none of them will survive to recover from anything. The harsh reality settled between them like a weight. Thorne turned back to the tactical display, watching red dots mark another Union world under assault. In 6 hours, Commander Blake would abandon the Kepler facility, and 200 civilians would die. The Voidborn would learn another false lesson about human psychology, and somewhere in the depths of space, their hive mind would grow more confident in its ability to predict and counter human behavior. Doctor, how close are we to having enough false data? After Blake's engagement, we'll have established 7 different behavioral patterns: fear, cowardice, recklessness, desperation, and 3 variants of retreat psychology. Reed pulled up projections showing voidborn confidence levels. Their models show 93% confidence in predicting human responses to crisis situations. Good. Thorne's voice was cold as space. Let them be confident. Overconfidence is just another weakness we can exploit. As he prepared to watch another of his commanders sacrifice everything for the mission, Thorne wondered if they would still be recognizably human when this war ended. But that was a question for survivors. First, they had to become survivors. All stations. This is actual. The Voidborn main fleet has just entered Centris Prime's gravity well. Estimate 47 capital ships, maybe 200 escorts. Thorne's voice cut through the battle chatter as he watched the largest enemy force ever assembled bear down on the Union capital world. Operation Mindbreak ends now. Contradiction protocol is live. The main screen showed tactical displays from 6 different battle zones around Centris Prime. After weeks of feeding the Voidborn false intelligence about human psychology, everything came down to the next 4 hours. Reed's analysis had been correct. The enemy hive mind was confident it could predict human behavior with 93% accuracy. Today, they would learn how wrong they were. Chen, what's your status at the orbital platforms? Thorne asked, watching the tactical display show her squadron apparently retreating in panic from superior Voidborn forces. Broadcasting full surrender protocols, just like they expect. Chen's voice carried none of the defeat her transmission suggested. Voidborn forces are moving to accept our capitulation. They think we're broken. Blake, northern approach? Playing the coward perfectly, sir. Abandoning defensive positions and running scared. The Voidborn are pursuing according to their psychological models. Blake's bitter laugh carried across the channel. Amazing how easy it is to fake being something you hate. Thorne felt the weight of what he was asking his people to do, but there was no other way. Phillips, Southern Vector? Charging the main Voidborn line in apparent desperation, just like a human commander who's lost his mind. They're repositioning to counter a reckless assault that's never coming. 6 different contradictions, all happening simultaneously. Chen was surrendering while secretly positioning for attack. Blake was retreating in cowardice while actually maneuvering into flanking position. Phillips was making a suicidal charge that would turn into a precision strike. 3 other commanders were executing similar contradictory strategies across the battle space. Dr. Reed, how are our Voidborn passengers doing? Thorne asked, referring to the captured biocomputers they'd secretly loaded onto a transport ship. Neural activity is spiking. They're trying to process 6 different behavioral models simultaneously, all contradicting their established psychological profiles. Reed's voice carried a mixture of fascination and horror. The paradox equations are ready for upload the moment we make contact with their command ship. The plan was insane by any conventional standard. While his fleet executed contradictory tactics to overload Voidborn predictive systems, Thorne would infiltrate their command vessel using a captured transport. Once inside, Reed's logical paradox would be introduced directly into their hive mind network, a mathematical proof that their perfect adaptation strategy was inherently self-defeating. Infiltration team, sound off. Ramirez here, explosives armed and ready. Torres, communications package prepared. Morgan, escape route secured. 12 volunteers who knew they probably weren't coming back. Thorne looked at each of them, men and women who had followed him through exile and war, now ready to die for a chance to save the galaxy. Remember, we're not trying to fight our way through their ship. We're trying to survive long enough to reach their neural center and upload the paradox. Thorne checked his sidearm, knowing it would be useless against Voidborn biotechnology. Reed, you're sure this will work? The mathematics are sound. A hive mind that processes information collectively can't handle recursive paradoxes without experiencing cascade failure. Reed's voice wavered slightly. But Marcus, once we upload this, the feedback through their quantum network will be instantaneous. Every Voidborn ship in the galaxy will be affected. And if it doesn't work, then we die knowing we tried everything. The captured transport shuddered as it approached the massive Voidborn command ship, its biomechanical hull pulsing with alien life. Thorne could smell the fear sweat of his team, could hear their rapid breathing. In the confined space. Outside, the battle for Centris Prime raged as his commanders continued their contradictory strategies. Chen, status report. The Voidborn are getting confused. Their pursuit patterns are becoming erratic. I think it's working. Docking clamps engaged, reported Torres. We're inside their ship. The next few minutes passed in a blur of violence and terror. Voidborn defenders appeared like nightmares from their biomechanical corridors, forcing Thorne's team to fight through living walls that bled and screamed. Ramirez felt as some kind of organic weapon that turned his bones to liquid. Morgan was absorbed by a wall that tried to digest him alive. But they pushed forward, following Reed's analysis of Voidborn's ship architecture, heading for the neural center where their hive mind processed tactical information. The air grew thick with organic vapors that made breathing difficult. The walls pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match Thorne's heartbeat. There! Reed pointed to a massive chamber filled with writhing neural fibers. That's their command nexus, the upload point for the paradox. Torres connected his equipment while the remaining team members held their position. Thorne could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the ship's corridors as more Voidborn forces converged on their location. Upload in progress, Torres announced. 30 seconds. Sir, we've got company, called Phillips over the comm. Multiple Voidborn boarding parties heading for your position. Hold them off, Thorne ordered, knowing it was probably impossible. 20 seconds. The neural fibers around them began to pulse more rapidly, as if sensing the intrusion. 15 seconds. The walls started to bleed some kind of acidic fluid that ate through their equipment. 10 seconds. Upload complete, Torres shouted. Paradox is in their system. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The neural chamber convulsed like a living thing in agony. Throughout the ship, organic systems began to spasm and fail. On the tactical display, Thorne watched as every Voidborn vessel in the fleet suddenly went dark, their biomechanical systems shutting down as their collective consciousness collapsed under the weight of unsolvable contradictions. All units, the Voidborn fleet is dead in space. Repeat, enemy fleet is offline. Chen's voice crackled with disbelief. Whatever you did, it worked. But victory came with a price. As the alien ship died around them, Thorne realized their escape route was sealed. The biomechanical corridors were collapsing, organic systems failing throughout the vessel. Emergency transporter activation, Torres called out, working frantically with damaged equipment. I can get maybe half of us out. Thorne looked at the 6 remaining members of his team, all of them understanding what that meant. Get Reed out first. His knowledge is too valuable to lose. Marcus, no! That's an order, Doctor. Thorne handed Reed his personal data pad. Make sure they understand the cost of this victory. Make sure they remember everyone who didn't make it home. As the transport beam took Reed and half the team, Thorne felt a strange peace settle over him. They had done the impossible. Defeated an enemy that could adapt to any strategy by being so unpredictable that their adaptation systems collapsed. But as he waited for rescue that might never come, surrounded by the dying bioship of humanity's greatest enemy, Thorne wondered if the galaxy would ever truly understand what his people had sacrificed to save them all. Commander Thorne, did you or did you not deliberately sacrifice civilian lives as part of your tactical strategy? The prosecutor's voice echoed through the Union's Grand Assembly Hall, where representatives from 47 species had gathered to judge humanity's conduct during the Voidborn War. 8 months after the victory at Centris Prime, Thorne sat in the defendant's chair, still bearing scars from his escape from the dying bioship. Thorne looked directly at the prosecutor, a tall Zentorian whose crystalline features showed obvious disgust. Yes, I ordered the abandonment of the Kepler mining facility, resulting in the deaths of 237 civilians. A murmur of horror rippled through the assembly. Chancellor Kethris, sitting in the witness section, looked pale despite his blue skin. The same leader who had begged for humanity's help now sat silent as his political allies demanded accountability for the methods that had saved them all. And the destruction of your own ships? The deliberate misinformation campaigns? The psychological torture of captured Voidborn specimens? The prosecutor's voice rose with each accusation. How do you justify these barbaric acts? I don't. Thorne's simple answer surprised everyone. I don't justify them because they don't need justification. They were necessary. Every civilian who died, every ship we sacrificed, every rule we broke, it was all necessary to prevent the extinction of every species in this room. Necessity does not excuse war crimes. War crimes? Thorne stood slowly, his voice carrying the weight of months of sleepless nights. You want to talk about war crimes? 12 Union worlds died while your fleets followed honor codes that made them predictable. Billions of innocent beings were slaughtered because your admirals refused to consider tactics that might offend their moral sensibilities. He gestured toward the assembly. Where were your ethics when the Voidborn were learning to counter every strategy you threw at them? Dr. Reed rose from the witness section, his scientific credentials giving him authority even among species that despised humanity. If I may address the assembly, Reed said, his voice carrying the calm authority of absolute certainty. The Voidborn were not simply adapting to Union tactics. They were building psychological profiles of entire species, learning to predict behavior patterns with mathematical precision. The prosecutor waved dismissively. Doctor, we've heard your theories. They're not theories. Reed activated a holographic display showing Voidborn biocomputer data. These are actual psychological assessments recovered from enemy vessels. The Voidborn knew that Zentorians would always prioritize civilian evacuation over tactical advantage. They knew that Corvin fleets would never abandon damaged vessels. They used these predictable moral responses as tactical weaknesses. A Corvin representative stood up, his insectoid features showing confusion. You're saying our honor was a weakness? I'm saying your predictability was fatal. Reed highlighted sections of the data. Every Union species follows moral codes that create behavioral patterns. The Voidborn exploited these patterns because they could predict with 93% accuracy how each species would respond to any tactical situation. And humans? Asked Chancellor Kethris quietly. Reed's expression grew somber. Humans are the only species whose psychological profiles showed contradictory behavior patterns. We're capable of acting against our own apparent interests, of sacrificing what we value most to achieve strategic objectives. The Voidborn couldn't predict us because human behavior contains inherent contradictions. You make us sound like psychopaths, muttered Admiral Korath from his seat. Not psychopaths, Reed corrected. Survivors. Earth's evolutionary history created a species comfortable with cognitive dissonance. We can hold two contradictory ideas simultaneously and act on both. We can mourn our dead while using their deaths strategically. We can value civilian lives while sacrificing them for the greater good. The assembly fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, a young Altarian delegate spoke up. Are you saying that humanity's moral flexibility is what saved us? I'm saying that humanity's willingness to bear the psychological cost of necessary actions is what saved the galaxy. Reed looked directly at Thorne. Commander Thorne and his officers deliberately destroyed their own moral certainty to create tactical unpredictability. They sacrificed their peace of mind, their relationships, their psychological health, all to become the kind of enemies the Voidborn couldn't understand. Chancellor Kethris stood slowly, his four eyes focused on Thorne. Commander, 3 years ago, we expelled humanity for violating the Galactic Warfare Conventions. We called you barbarians, said you were too dangerous for civilized space. His voice carried the weight of profound regret. We were wrong, not about your methods being dangerous. They are. But we were wrong about why that danger exists. Chancellor, let me finish. Kethris walked to the center of the assembly floor. Humanity's willingness to embrace tactical barbarism isn't a character flaw. It's a survival trait that the rest of us lack. When the Voidborn came, our honor codes made us easy prey. Only a species willing to abandon honor could create the unpredictability necessary to defeat them. The prosecutor tried to interrupt, but Kethris continued. The Union formally apologizes for humanity's exile. We offer full reinstatement, expanded citizenship rights, and command authority over Union defense forces. Thorne was quiet for a long moment, studying the faces around him. Beings who had condemned humanity's methods while benefiting from their results. I appreciate the offer, Chancellor, but I must decline. The assembly erupted in confused murmurs. Kethris looked stunned. Commander, surely after everything, we've learned that humanity's greatest service to the galaxy is remaining outside your moral framework. Thorne's voice carried absolute conviction. If we rejoin the Union, we'll be expected to follow your rules, adopt your honor codes, become predictable again. The next time an adaptive enemy appears, you'll need allies who are still willing to break every rule to win. What are you proposing? A new relationship. Humanity remains independent, but serves as the galaxy's strategic reserve. When conventional warfare fails, when honor becomes a liability, when survival requires someone willing to do the unthinkable, you call us. Thorne looked around the assembly. We'll be your barbarians, your war criminals, your last resort. And when the shooting stops, we'll go back to our exile and let you return to being civilized. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would serve as the galaxy's guardians from the shadows, forever outside the moral boundaries that define civilized space, ready to sacrifice their souls when everyone else's survival depended on it. Attention on deck! The instructor's voice carried across the training facility as 200 officers from 37 different species snapped to attention. Commander Thorne walked slowly through the ranks, studying faces that showed everything from curiosity to barely concealed fear. The Kepler Institute had been operational for 2 years now, teaching the galaxy's military elite the tactical philosophy that had defeated the Voidborn. At ease, Thorne said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had stared into the abyss and lived to tell about it. Today we're going to discuss the psychological cost of asymmetric warfare. Lieutenant Chen, please dim the lights. The holographic display showed casualty reports from the Voidborn War, not just death tolls, but psychological assessments of surviving human commanders. Chen's own medical file appeared on screen, showing PTSD markers that would never fully heal. War isn't just about defeating the enemy, Thorne began, walking among the assembled officers. It's about being willing to live with what victory requires. Commander Blake, who deliberately abandoned 200 civilians, requested psychiatric discharge 6 months after the war ended. Commander Phillips, who led 3 separate, cowardly retreats, hasn't slept through a full night since Centris Prime. A young Zentorian officer raised her hand. Sir, if the psychological damage is so severe, how do you justify these tactics? Thorne stopped in front of her, seeing his own younger self in her earnest expression. Because the alternative was extinction. Officer candidate Thyra, isn't it? Tell me, what would have happened if we had fought honorably against the Voidborn? We would have lost, sir. Correct. Every species in this room would be extinct. Your families, your cultures, your civilizations, all gone because we weren't willing to sacrifice our moral comfort for your survival. Thorne's voice softened slightly. The question isn't whether these tactics are justified. The question is whether you're strong enough to bear the cost when necessity demands it. After the class dismissed, Thorne walked alone through the memorial garden that honored the war's casualties. Garrett Voss's name was etched in black stone alongside 2,000 others who had died in the conflict. But the memorial that affected him most was smaller, less visible. A simple plaque listing the human commanders who had survived the war but never recovered from what they had been forced to do. Dr. Reed found him there, as he did most evenings. The scientist looked older now, carrying the weight of knowledge that had saved the galaxy while destroying the souls of those who implemented it. The Andorian delegation wants to establish a satellite training facility, Reed reported, settling beside Thorne on the memorial bench. They're particularly interested in the psychological conditioning protocols. And you told them that some knowledge comes with a price they might not be willing to pay. Reed stared at Voss's memorial marker. Marcus, do you ever regret it? The choices we made? Thorne considered the question that had haunted him for 3 years. Every day. But regret isn't the same as being wrong. We did what was necessary to preserve life in this galaxy. The fact that it cost us our peace of mind doesn't change that. A young human officer approached, clearly nervous about interrupting. Sir, priority message from Union Intelligence. They're tracking unusual energy signatures in the Outer Rim. Possible first contact situation. Thorne and Reed exchanged glances. 3 years of peace had been more than they had dared hope for, but they both knew it couldn't last forever. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's reputation as the species willing to do anything for survival had already begun attracting attention from forces beyond Union space. Alert status? Thorne asked. Unknown, sir, but the energy patterns don't match any known technology. Reed stood slowly, his scientific curiosity warring with exhaustion. New threats mean new tactics, new moral compromises, and new prices to pay, Thorne added, feeling the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. Prepare the senior staff. If this is what I think it is, the galaxy is going to need its barbarians again. As the sun set over the Kepler Institute, casting long shadows across the memorial garden, Thorne reflected on humanity's strange destiny. They had become the galaxy's protectors by remaining outside its moral boundaries, guardians who preserve civilization by refusing to be civilized themselves. The young officer waited for orders, his face showing the same mixture of eagerness and fear that Thorne had seen in every recruit who came to learn humanity's way of war. Soon this boy might face the same impossible choices that had broken so many others. Soon he might learn that the greatest service to the galaxy required sacrificing everything that made life worth preserving. But that was tomorrow's burden. Tonight, Thorne would honor the dead, prepare for the unknown, and accept the role that history had given his species, forever standing guard at the edge of darkness, ready to embrace whatever horrors were necessary to keep the light burning for everyone else. The galaxy slept peacefully, protected by monsters who had chosen to become monsters so that others could remain innocent. And in the depths of space, new threats stirred, unaware that humanity was waiting for them, with tactics no civilized species would ever consider. The war against the Voidborn was over. The next war was just beginning, and humanity would be ready to pay whatever price victory demanded, just as they always had, just as they always would. The story was complete, but the vigil was eternal. If this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell for more brutal HFY warfare stories. Now we want to hear from you. If you were Commander Thorne, what moral line would you cross to save the galaxy? Would you sacrifice civilians for tactical advantage? Or is there a price too high to pay for victory? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one, and your strategic insights fuel our next stories.